yes, we know it is 14 symbols in one slot. And if we have increased number of slots as per the scalable subcarrier, then we have total number of slots and total number of symbols combination in one subframe will be obviously different. But in general, for 15 kilohertz of subcarrier spacing, and it is as LTE is also using 15 kilohertz subcarrier spacing, and basic subcarrier spacing in 5G is also 15 kilohertz. So we have this combination of L0 from N minus 1 and subcarriers, you can say K0 from K to N resource blocks in downlink into N subcarriers in particular resource block minus 1. So if this is one resource element, then combination of these resource elements are called resource block. So we have 12 subcarriers in particular resource block. If you count, it is basically 12 subcarriers. So this 12 subcarrier is defining number of subcarriers in that particular resource block, and this total is defining this particular thing. It is defining number of resource blocks in that particular channel, you can say, or downlink frame or subframe, you can say. So we have the combinations of resource elements which is making resource blocks, and ultimately those resource blocks are combined together and given the name of resource grid. This is same for LTE and 5G. Now we have to implement these radio access technology, which is basically RAT, which is called RAT in 5G, radio access technology or new radio technology. We have to implement for 5G, and this radio access technology we have to implement for LTE for this subcarrier spacing. So obviously, as per the requirement of the standard, this scalable subcarrier spacing or fixed subcarrier spacing is going to be implemented on the hardware or elements of architecture. So before moving to 5G, 4G and 5G architecture, I just want to give you a look of 3G architecture, because 3G was the architecture which was ultimately designed for mobile data. So they have identified base stations. Now the name given for 3G base stations are Node B, and those Node Bs are connected to RNC. So the 2G, BTS in 2G was now converted as a name of RNC, Radio Network Controller. And that radio network controller is connected to ultimately core network, and that core network is VLR, mobile switching center. This is visiting location register. This is mobile switching center, which is ultimately connected to gateway mobile switching center. So this part is basically similar to the 2G architecture part, because visitor location register, mobile switching center, gateway mobile switching center, these are considered to be the part of GSM architecture also. So similar was considered in UMTS itself. Then these elements, authentication center, HLR and EIR. HLR is home location register, EIR is your equipment identity registers. These are also the part of 2G, 2.5G, 2.75G generation, and this SGSN and GGSN. So this particular part was used by GPRS and edge facilities, so that data facilities can be available to the mobile users with the help of these two elements. One is your serving gateway service node, second is your GPRS gateway service node. So these two elements or these two blocks are responsible for providing in data network to the users which were on 2G networks, which were using 2G network. So this is basically the requirement of data from 2G point of view. Then this whole infrastructure related to PSTN and core network was used by 3G itself to give data facilities to the user. But the additional infrastructure is that radio network controller, this Node B, because Node B is was more intelligent as compared to the base station in 2G, and radio network controller is also intelligent as compared to the BTS in comparison to the 2G network. That is why this network name is given the Universal Terrestrial Radio Access Network. And in 2G, there was a difference that no BTS was connected to another BTS. But in 3G, they have given the interfacing of RNC to RNC, and that interfacing was given by this. These are the specifications or names given to the interfaces from one unit to another unit. So this was the UMTS or 3G architecture. So basic was that you have to use voice communication, you have to use basically circuit switching, and you have to use packet switching for your data. And for packet switching, you are using this available network, which was already available, having some intelligent nodes attached to the network. Now, when we move towards 4G architecture or 4G, it was defined the term magic for 4G at that time, because it was expected that 4G was totally different from 3G, or it will enhance the experience of user in terms of data rate or speed. So that is why the term magic was given to that, and full form of that magic is mobile multimedia, anytime, anywhere availability, global mobility support, integrated wireless solution, customized personal services. This was considered to be the part of 4G communication at that time. So if we move, we have solutions from GSM to LTE itself, that we already seen in previous diagram, that we have core network having circuit switching and packet switching things, and those core network circuit switching and packet switching things, whether it is 2G part, BTS connected to controller, and that is connected to circuit switch and packet switch, which is GPRS or Edge. Then 3G, we have node B. Node B is again connected to this part, and it is called 3G UMTS part. But if you see, this is our 4G part or LTE part. So the previous radio access networks, which are evolved now in terms of 4G, has been given the name EUTRAN. EUTRAN means Evolved Universal Terrestrial Radio Access Network. So this EUTRAN is Evolved Universal Terrestrial Radio Access Network. So this particular unit is EUTRAN is basically that you have radio access network, which is evolved from previous generations and which is much better services than previous generation. So this LTE or 4G mobile communication, 4G mobile set is you are connected to E node B. It is evolved node B. The node B was the name of the BTS in 3G. Now the name changed to E node B, which is evolved node B, having access to core network through your access technology, one of the technology OFDMA. So that OFDMA technology was multiplexing or air interface between the mobile user and eNode B, and at the backend also this OFDMA technology was used by the packet core network. So this eNode B is connected to packet switched or EPC. So now, which was the controller part and the core network part, the name given in 4G was EPC, Evolved Packet Core Network, or Evolved Packet System. So this is the name for Evolved Packet System. So it is defined that we have modified or evolved node B or BTS, and then we have modified packet system or core network system, which is there for 4G communication. So that evolved packet system, that evolved packet system was purely, it is considered as a purely IP based. It is designed as a purely IP based system, which is in which IP addresses are allocated whenever your mobile is switched on and released when it is switched off. So the access technology used was OFDMA, because previously it is only WCDMA, CDMA, or GSM, TDMA, FDMA technology was there. So in 4G communication, they have used OFDMA. Then the highest critical peak rate at that time considered to be 75 Mbps and 300 Mbps, and that is obviously critical, which we have also calculated yesterday. So this LTE access network is a network of eNode Bs. No centralized intelligent controller was there. eNode Bs are normally interconnected. So in 4G communication, if you see, your eNode Bs are interconnected, and those eNode Bs are having a deciding factor itself. They have intelligent algorithms, or they are intelligent enough to decide some of the things which were previously done by our network controllers, or our you can say access network controllers or base station controllers. So it is now that evolved node B is intelligent enough. So we can say the reason for distributing the intelligence among the base station in LTE is to speed up the connection setup, because previously we have mobile station. That mobile station will communicate to BTS, BTS will communicate to BSC, BSC will communicate to MSC, then in some cases GMSC, then it will again go back, and so on. So we have a long process of transmission, then acknowledgements, then your reactions, and so on. So that is why to speed up the connection setup and to reduce the time required for handovers, one of the intelligent thing was that e-node bids are intelligent enough and they can decide some parameters by themselves, and it will obviously speed up the process. So they have e-node bees connection with each other, and ultimately all e-node bees are connected to Evolved Packet Core Network. So another advantage with this distributed solution that e-node bees are connected to EPC directly, that your medium access control protocol layer, which is basically responsible for scheduling in mobile communication, is represented only in user equipment and base station. So you have these layer structures, but for 4G communication, MAC protocol layer is responsible for, which is responsible for scheduling, is available in user equipment and base station itself only, so that it will lead to fast communication. Because the ultimate goal of LTE is to provide high-speed data to network connection to the user and high speed or you can say data rate to the user. So for that they have designed some algorithms, or they have designed some methodologies or specifications so that our system can be fast enough for communication. The system can be fast enough for decisions between the e-node bees and user equipment. So this is for LTE. But when LTE was introduced, it is always compared with 3G communication. So nowadays also, if we talk about 5G, we compare it with 4G communication. That 5G will have this, 4G will have already had this, but 5G has evolved from this technology, and now it is giving better services. So that is why when we talk about 4G, we have to compare it with 3G also, because the same methodology, 3G was also targeted as a broadband connection generation. It is the target of 3G communication to provide multimedia services to the user with 2 Mbps of speed. But that was not actually utilized by the users. So after 4G, they have started using internet over their mobile devices. That is why 2G, 3G was also considered as a part of that. So in UMTS, the MAC protocol and scheduling is located in the controller. So if you see in 3G part, your scheduling is related to the controller, and in 4G, scheduling is related to only our e-node B and our user equipment. So additional entity, that your user equipment will be there, your node B will be there, and then controller is there. So you have additional element to decide for you for user equipment, that what should be done under particular condition. So that was located in controller, and when high-speed data packet access was introduced, this sublayer, MAC sublayers, additional MAC sublayers were scheduled in Node 2. So there are modifications started from 3G itself, which fully moved to 4G with the introduction of a technology long-term evolution. So in 3G, they have in controller, then in 3.5G conditions, they move it to Node B. Some part sublayer responsible for high-speed packet access scheduling, and that part is added in Node B. So we can say that the scheduler is basically a key component for achievement of a fast, adjusted, and efficient utilized radio resource. Whichever radio resource or radio block you are using, you have to utilize this efficiently, because spectrum efficiency is one of the major parameters to be achieved by the service providers, because it will provide maximum usage of the spectrum, and optimum usage of the spectrum, you can say, or maximum usage of the spectrum, and it will give increase the capacity of the spectrum also, or a service provider. So for that, scheduler has important role, and that is why in 4G they shift the scheduler to the e-node B. Then the term transmission time interval. In 4G, the transmission time interval is fixed to 1 millisecond. Now, what is transmission time interval? It is basically the time required to transmit one block. So when one resource block is transmitted from one end to another end, it is given the time interval name as TTI, which is transmission time interval, and 4G, this transmission time interval is fixed to 1 millisecond. So if we look a broad view of LTE infrastructure, you can have through this diagram that we have user equipments, different user equipments. Those user equipments are connected to different e-node Bs, and finally e-node Bs are connected to your core networks. But now that core network has a overall name as EPS or EPC, you can say. This whole system is called EPS, but this core network is called Evolved Packet Core Network. Now this core network has some gateways. One is your S gateways, one is your P gateways. So these S gateways are called serving gateways and P gateways are called packet gateways. So as you can see, this responsibility of this packet gateway is giving interfacing from other IP networks or internet connections to the 4G code network. So this packet gateway, data network gateway will give interfacing from other IP sites to the 4G connection. Now these serving gateways are taking the request of e-node Bs, which are provided by user equipment, and forwarding those requests to packet gateways, and finally packet gateway is giving access to that particular site to the user. Now these serving gateways, packet gateways, they are connected to this one unit which is called mobility management entity, home subscriber server, and policy charging and rule function. So previously in 2G or 3G, we have VLR, we have HLR, we have EIR, we have EAUC. So these are four different entities, four different elements. But now in 4G, they consider these under this one particular entity, and that entity is working as mobility management entity. That entity is also working as PCRF, which is policy charging and rule functions, which is defining policies and chargings for the mobile subscribers, and home service subscriber, which was HLR, and now it is HSS. And this home subscriber server has information of all the subscribers under his network. For example, if you are a Geo user, so your database under your circle is provided to this HSS of that particular Geo infrastructure. Similarly, we have these e-node Bs equipment. So whenever you place a call or whenever you place a request, this request was forwarded to e-node B. E-node B forwarded to connected serving gateway. Serving gateway will forward that request to packet gateway, and as per your request, you will get access to your requirement. And finally, as per the data charges or policy charging or rule functions you have defined for your plan, your this home subscriber server will help you in authentication, and this policy charging and rule function will help you for charging, help service provider to charge you accordingly. And this mobility management entity will help whenever you move from one service area to another service area. So we can say that we have one control plane, another data plane. This is continued in 5G also, that we have control plane and data plane. So whenever you have user equipment connected with base station, so it is e-node B. So e-node B part is having both control plane. This pink color is basically showing that it is control plane part and it is user plane part. And then it means it is connected to user also. It is connected to control part for core network also, then serving gateway, packet gateway, and finally these three entities, mobility management, PCRF, and HSS, these are only for control plane. So they are not directly connected to the user. They are only for the control part, and that is they are the part of core network, which is available for the service providers only. So this e-node B, serving gateway, packet gateways, these three entities, they are involved in your session setup. Whenever you set for a request, they are involved in giving you a session setup. They are involved for handoff. They are involved for routing of your call. So one of the major thing done by each and every mobile phone, whichever generation you will use or you are using, that is called access procedure, which is called cell search. Whenever you switch on your mobile, suppose you have bought new mobile, or you have taken new SIM, or your mobile phone gets switched off and you switch it on again, then it will give a cell search. That cell search means your mobile want to get connected with the service provider base station of your service provider. If you are a Geo user, it will get connected to Geo service provider. If you are a BSNL user, it will get connected to BSNL. If you are any other service provider user, you will get the services from that particular service provider. But for receiving those services, you need base station connection, and that for that you need cell search to be done by actually the cell search will be done by your mobile phone. So it means the base station will broadcast synchronization signals and cell system information. It means this particular BTS is going to provide broadcasting the informations to all the available users in their particular cell. If this is a cell, so it is broadcasting its synchronization signal. So whenever new user came, switch on the mobile phone, it will get connected to that particular base station, and it will get the information of that synchronization system and cell system information. So user equipment will obtain all the physical layer information, which is basically the frequency of that particular cell and the synchronization to a cell. Whenever you switch on your mobile phone, or whenever your mobile phone get connected, how it is only connected to that particular service provider. If you are a Geo user, so how your mobile phone get latched to a Geo base station, or BSNL base station, or so the frequencies which are available for service providers to a particular region, because as you know, the service provider will purchase the frequency bands. So whichever frequency bands they receive, they particularly create base stations, or they plan accordingly to the region of the coverage, and then they place base stations, and as per the base stations frequencies they have assigned, they use those frequencies for transmission and reception. And whenever you purchase a SIM of that particular service provider, your SIM is also linked with that frequency slots. Your SIM has information of all the frequency slots available for that particular service provider. That is why whenever you move from one area, one circle to another circle, or from one state to another state, maybe that particular same service provider is not available giving frequency bands to you or giving coverage to you, but some other service provider is providing services to those particular users. So they have agreements between each others, and accordingly their SIM cards are updated, their SIM cards are having frequency information. So that is why whenever a user mobile perform a cell search, user equipment will get the information of frequency. It will synchronize that to a particular cell. It will identify the downlink of frame. Downlink frame means whichever resource grid we have identified, it will identify which particular resource block is there, or which particular downlink frame is there. It will get synchronized with that, find the cell identity, because each BTS have some identification numbers, so or identifications. So it will determine the cell identity, and finally it will access the random access to establish a radio link. Now the phone bars available on your mobile phones will be there, and these phone bars are basically identify that you are connected to your particular network. That is why whenever I always say, there is no network, because bars are very low, we don't have network. So these bars basically define that we have access to that particular radio link of a base station. So which is mean that whenever a client search for base station, it will get random access request. You will give random access request to base station. You will get the response accordingly. You will transmit your mobile ID, and ultimately you will get access, and you will get the connection from the base station. Connection setup is there, that whenever sessions request user equipment to base station to mobile entity, it means whenever you want a session request, you dial some number, and you want that your number should be get connected to that particular user, so you are sending that request to base station, or e-node B you can say, or node B. So though e-node B is giving your request to MME, mobility management entity, then management entity obtain the subscriber info from HSS, because it is the part of HSS, is also the part of this. So it will obtain the all the information of subscriber, because you are the subscribers. You will get the your information will be received by MME, because it basically want to get the information, particular services you are allowed, which type of services you are allowed, what is your SIM card number, your mobile equipment entry, authentication, and basically you can say procedures and security procedure. It will obtain the information of the subscriber. It will select accordingly the serving gateway and packet gateway. Now this serving gateway sends to packet gateway. Packet gateway will obtain the policy, that what are the policies available for your charging. So this is the connection setup process. Then when you have a session response, it means you have some response from somewhere. Then packet gateway will establish a GPRS tunnel. GPRS means your packet radio services tunnel is created, and it is created between serving gateway and packet gateway, and then serving gateway will send that to particular user equipment, because and it will also give information to this mobility management entity. So it means previously we had so many units in 2G and 3G, but in 4G these the working of different elements is done by this particular unit, and these are connecting the request. They are accepting the request, they are responding according to the request, they are making the connection setup, they are maintaining the connection, they are maintaining the mobility of the users, and accordingly after response, base station will allocate the radio resource to the user equipment, because when it get the response from serving gateway, it will allocate this particular resource or a block or element to the user to transmit. So this is our connection setup. Now, if we are in mobility, whether you are using 4G or 5G, this thing will be approximately similar. That when you are in mobility, so mobility management will be there, and it is done by MME. So whenever you change a serving gateway or you change a base station or E node B, so there are handoffs between those E node Bs. You can say you are moving from one cell to another cell, so you are changing E node B. So this is considered as a handoff without change of serving gateway. It means your serving gateway will remain same, and you are moving from one E node B to another E node B. I can give it as an example that within your institute, you are moving from one building to another building. So your serving gateway is same, your E node B is changing, and there is no change in packet gateway. So this is one of the type of handoff or mobility management which MME has to do. Another handoff is with the change of serving gateway, that now you are moving from one building to another building, or you can say you are moving from one institute to another institute, but your packet gateway is similar. So now you have the handoff with change of serving gateways, or even your MMEs are changing. So this is another type of handoff which need to be handled. And finally, the inter-technology handoff. Inter-technology handoff means you are moving from one technology. You are using 3G connection, now you are moving towards a 4G connection network area. So you are having the inter-technology handoff. In future, it will be from 4G to 5G, or again 4G, 5G to 4G. So we have different types of mobility management requirements as per the architecture. Similarly, if serving gateway receives a packet to user equipment in idle state information, for example, now your mobile phones you are is in idle state. Nothing is going on your mobile phones. You are not doing anything with your mobile phone. So your mobile phone or user equipment is in idle state. So, and your serving gateway receives a packet to a user equipment. You have receiving a packet from serving gateway. So obviously serving gateway will inform mobility management entity, and that mobility management entity will page user equipment to base station. And after your paging request, you will get the information back to your mobile phone. So there are some defined command structures. There are some defined methods to communicate between the elements of the 4G architecture or 5G architectures, and they are going to be utilized as per the requirement. Now, another major feature for 4G architecture and in 5G also will be LTE power management. Power management is one of the major thing which is required, that we have LTE, long-term evolution, suppose you are using, and the target of that particular technology or generation is to give high data rate at high speed. But whenever we are using these type of applications which are utilizing high data rate and high speed network, obviously they have power consumption, and that too high power consumption. And because of that, battery draining is a drawback, one of the major drawback. And if you remember, when we started using 4G network initially, even nowadays also, if you use your mobile phone, you are watching YouTube or videos or so on your mobile phone, so your battery drains out very fast. So even in the back end, you have so many applications running. We download so many applications and they are running in back end, so they are also draining our battery. So that is why these technologies need some features which support the power saving features, and that one of the feature was designed is called as a DRX mechanism. DRX means your discontinuous reception mechanism, which was used by which is used by LT, and which is now going to be used by 5G also. So this discontinuous reception is basically the process of turning off the radio receiver when it does not accept to receive any incoming messages. Whenever it basically your mobile phone is observed by the BTS, and when it is have that it doesn't have expect any message reception, so it will turn off for a particular time and then again it will turn on. So there is some of the time periods when it get turned off, you will get power saving feature involved. So to achieve this, obviously will be an agreement between the network and user equipment, so that it wake up at the scheduled duration to look for the messages received by the receiver. So if we see, without DRX support, user equipments always need to monitor this particular channel. This particular channel is common control channel, our packet data common control channel, because we have some of the channel structures available in every generations for a particular work. So for the power management, we have user equipment need to monitor this particular channel, which is a common control channel for every subframe, for every 1 millisecond. And whenever user equipment monitor this particular channel, obviously it will drain battery power quickly, because every 1 millisecond it is going to do this. So instead of monitoring this for every 1 millisecond, they have an agreement that network and the user equipment between them, that user equipment will monitor this particular channel every 100 millisecond, and discontinuously it saves a lot of battery. So it means they have a particular time duration for on, then long time duration off, then again on duration, and then off duration, and this total time is called DRX cycle, which is discontinuous reception cycle. So accordingly, during this off duration, they are saving the battery. Instead of continuously monitoring this particular part, they are saving the battery and they are adding into that, because as a user, you are using applications, you will obviously use your mobile phone, so it will drain accordingly. But the backend applications which is required to maintain the connection, which is required to set up the connection, which is required to give signal strength to the user, these processes are now changes or evolved as per the generation. So to save the battery power, LT will support power saving features, and LT specifications will provide DRX management for the DRX mechanism for power management. So whenever a user equipment will always be in one of two RC state, it is considered that either it is radio resource controlling ideal state, or it is considered as radio resource connected state. So we have two RRC. RRCs means your radio resource states, controlling states. So whether it is in ideal mode or it is in connected mode, they have only two phases, either on, either off, either on or off. So accordingly, they are working on that power feature. So for that, they have this RRC connected and RRC ideal. This blue is showing data transfer. It means you have two types of DRX. It is short DRX, it is long DRX. So continuous reception. So from long DRX to continuous reception, it means you are moving towards data transfer. Then continuous reception to short DRX means you are basically towards when you have timer expiration, then you move towards shorter duration. Then from if shorter duration timer is expired, you can move towards long duration. So you have a cycle from this continuous reception to your reception or RRC connected. Similarly, 3G was also have this feature, but they have different radio power management or concept as compared to 4G communication. The 4G spectrum, as was discussed previously, but I'll just give you this look that 3GPP has defined some of the bands names, and they have some defined frequencies accordingly. And these are the frequencies provided for LTE, TDD techniques. Now, if you compare LTE and LTE advanced, this is basically 3.9G and 4G exactly. So we can say the peak data rate, which was defined for technology, was 150. It was 1 Gbps for this. 75 Mbps was downlink, 500 Mbps was the target's data rate for LTE advanced. Then transmission bandwidth is 20 megahertz, it is 100 megahertz. Obviously, a combination of subcarriers are there to give it 100 megahertz of shot. Then transmission bandwidth of 20 megahertz in uplink, which was as per the requirement of ITU, it was shifted to 40 megahertz. Then mobility was a feature which is same in LT was supported by LTA, and LT has supported the optimized for low speeds. It has supported its high performance for at the speed of 120 km per hour and maintain links at the speed of 350 km per hour. So if you see for coverage, full performance is up to 5 kilometers, and it is again LTE Advanced has the same coverage area for microcell and local areas advantage. Scalable bandwidth was 1.33, 5, 10, and 20, and it is from 20 to 100 megahertz. So this is basically moving towards, you can say, the uses of carrier aggregation, because using that carrier aggregation, LTE Advanced is able to achieve this 100 megahertz of transmission bandwidth. So capacity obviously increased. If transmission bandwidth increasing, it means the capacity is increasing from LTE to LTE Advanced. So if you see, LTE Advanced is exactly the 4G communication. The architecture will be same. Only the difference between the usage of the subcarriers, the usage of your channel bandwidth, scalable channel bandwidth, is improving the technology standard. So the main straightforward way to increase the capacity is to add more bandwidth. But bandwidth is fixed. You cannot add more bandwidth. So which was difficult in communication. So that is why backward compatibility with previous releases of 3GPP was there in LTE Advanced, and to increase in bandwidth in LTE Advanced is provided through aggregation. As I said, that carrier aggregation is the major feature of LTE Advanced and LTE Advanced architecture. So each aggregated carrier is referred to as a component carrier. Now, how this basically carrier aggregation works, that the component carrier bandwidth, which is moving from 1.3 to 20 megahertz, maximum of 5 component carriers can be aggregated, because 1, 2, if you see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we have this bandwidth, this or 20 megahertz. So LT Advance has a carrier advancement of you can say 100 megahertz. It is saying, so 100 megahertz is saying either 5 component carriers can be aggregated. So normally 20 megahertz of 5 component carriers, when you aggregate it, will get 100 megahertz of the component carrier. So maximum bandwidth is 100 megahertz. The number of aggregated carriers can be different. Carriers can be different in downlink and uplink. It means whenever, if you see a subcarrier or a carrier, whenever you are using some subcarriers, and we have a limit of 5, maximum 5 component carrier can be used. So we are basically combining together. And in downlink, if you see in this diagram, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 subcarriers combining together. These component carriers combine together to give a channel bandwidth of 100 megahertz for downlink. Similarly, for uplink also, they have 1 or 2 or 3, because as per the requirement, they will identify the bandwidth. If you see, we have the downlink bandwidth of 100 megahertz and uplink bandwidth, we need 40 megahertz as per the requirement of the ITU. So for 40 megahertz, it means we only need these either 2 subcarriers or 3 subcarriers combination. So this has the requirement of 100 megahertz and this has the requirement of 40 megahertz for uplink, for downlink. So we have different procedures for uplink and downlink for aggregation of the carriers. So these aggregated carriers are now called as a component carriers. So now how we can combine together? It is not that you are just picked up and combined the component carriers and you will achieve 100 megahertz of bandwidth. So we have some ways to achieve that. One is intra-band. carrier aggregation. In this form of carrier aggregation, we are using a single band, and there are two main formats for this type of carrier aggregation again. So you can say you have intra-band, and in that intra-band, it means you are using from suppose 890 to 915 you have a band. So this is a single frequency band component, and in that single frequency band, you are combining your component carriers. But in intra-band, they have two processes. One is contiguous, another is non-contiguous. So contiguous means in intra-band contiguous carrier aggregation is the easiest form of LTE carrier aggregation to implement. Here carriers are adjacent to each other. So if you see, as I'll show you, that you have this particular part and they are continuous in nature. So they are within same adjacent to each other. So they are easy to combine. So that is, it is contiguous or intra-band nature of carrier aggregation. So we can say that we have carrier aggregation of user equipment, non-CA carrier aggregation, non-CA carrier aggregation. So we have components, these are combined together. We have this component for E node B. We have different components for E node B. So we don't have carrier aggregation. So they are not supporting carrier aggregation. They are not supporting carrier aggregation, but they are supporting carrier aggregation. So if they are supporting carrier aggregation, they have different component carriers altogether to achieve the required speed and for uplink and for downlink. So intra-band carrier aggregation, contiguous component carriers means we have band A, and in that particular band A, you are having continuous component carriers, so you are combining them. But if we go for intra-band carrier aggregation, which is non-contiguous component carriers, it means we have band A, but we have different, they are not adjacent to each other, and they can be combined together, which is intra-band carrier aggregation under non-contiguous component carrier. Just wait. Sorry, now we'll continue that we have intra-band carrier aggregation. So one is contiguous component carrier and another is non-continuous contiguous component carrier. So in the same band, we have adjacent carriers, and in same band, we have different carriers to combine to get 100 megahertz of bandwidth. So non-contiguous, as we have seen in the diagram, it is intra-band carrier aggregation is somewhat more complicated than the instance where adjacent carrier are used. So no longer can the multi-carrier signal be treated as a single signal, and therefore two transceivers are required in this. So obviously, as per the carrier aggregation process, your infrastructure requirement or your hardware requirement will be different. So this adds significant complexity, particularly to the user equipment, because these things to be added into your user equipment itself. And in that, we have space, power, and cost are the primary consideration, because user equipment size is fixed. So and obviously cost need to be not to be very high. It should not go very high. So we have different challenges in implementing these facilities available by 4G and 5G. Next, second type of carrier aggregation is inter-band carrier aggregation. Obviously, as shown in this diagram, we have one band, we have second band, and they have different component carriers. So band A is having component carrier, band B is having some component carriers, and they are combined together. So it will be of particular use because of the fragmentation of bands, some of which are only 10 megahertz wide. So as per your requirement, you can combine the components of carriers, and the maximum bandwidth you can achieve is 100 megahertz. So for the user equipment, it requires the use of multiple transceivers within a single item. Again, the impact of cost, performance, and power. So up till now, I have discussed 4G architecture, but many points of 4G architecture are common with 5G architecture, and only some functionalities are different, and those functionalities will be discussed in these slides now, that we have radio interface architecture names, and the notifications of those particular architectures have been changed. And as per the scalable subcarrier spacing or numerologies of OFDMA, new numerology of OFDMA in 5G communication, the architecture, 4G architecture can be utilized, but with some modifications. So we have a new radio architecture because we have new radio scalable numerology. Then different methods for connecting this new radio RAN, because in 4G you have seen that we have our E node B, we have our serving gateway, we have packing gateway, and those serving and packet gateways are connected to MME, HSS or TCRF. So we have these units which are connected together. But in 5G, we have different combinations that it can be connected to LTE network, it can be connected to 5G core networks. So different options are available. So when you talk about radio access network, we can say that it is radio related functionality of overall network, which has scheduling, help in scheduling, radio resource handling, that which frequency band, how much is allocated to which user, or whenever user send a request, the radio resource allocation is the responsibility of radio access network. Then retransmissions or protocols that whenever your signal got dropped or some reason you want to retransmit, the coding physical layer, some of the physical layer parameters are supported by, you can say, radio access network, and coding is one of them. Then multi-antenna schemes are implemented at the radio access network. So in 5G, the name which was given for 4G in for BTS is E node B. So if we move see from 2G, 2G has a name of BTS. Then 3G has a name. 2G has a name. Yeah, 2G has a name of BTS. 3G has a name of node B. 4G has a name of G node B, and then 5G has a name of G node B. So we move from node B to evolved node B. We move from node B to evolved node B. Then for 5G, it is now G node B. So it is basically generation node B, because when 3GPP started working, or the groups which are working for 5G communication, after some time they have identified the communication for next generation networks or next generation architecture. That is why they changed that name to generation node B. That new generation, whichever be there, will has a name of G node B. So this G node B again has two parts. One is called central unit, another is called the distributed unit. So our basic radio access network architecture has one major element called G node B. That G node B is having two units. One is central unit, another is a distributed unit. So some features are available with central unit, and some of the features are available with your distributed unit, which is distributed to other elements also. So this type of architecture of G node B helps in virtualizing the network functionality, because one of the major thing which is helpful in 5G communication is NFV and network slicing, which I am going to discuss in coming slides. So this architecture will help 5G in virtualizing the network functionalities, which will ultimately give the flexibility to the network, and it will reduce the cost of the network implementation cost, you can say. For a device to communicate, at least one connection between the device and network is required. Obviously, whenever you have a mobile phone, your 5G mobile phone, it should have at least one connection to be connected to your G node B. Device and network should have one connection. However, allowing the device to connect to network through multiple cells can be beneficial in some scenarios. So you can see that this 5G architecture is going to have some of the features or implementations can be possible, that your device can be connected to network through multiple cells. And one example is you are using aggregation arraying, where flows from multiple cells and aggregated to increase the data rate. So 5G core network is considered to be a totally service-based architecture, because in 5G communication, as we have said, we have three use cases, and as per those use cases, one is eMBB, URLCC, and your mission critical services. As per these use cases, your services are identified, and on the basis of services, your 5G core network is a service-based architecture. So the specification basically focus on services and functionality which is provided by the core network. So when we talk about 5G network standard, it can be a standalone standard, it can be a non-standalone standard. When we have standalone standard, it means we have a 5G network full functionality, that your BTS or G node B is, this is your new radio cell or 5G cell, and this 5G cell has a full functionality of G node B, full control plane functionality. You have total coverage, total functionality of 5G communication on this standalone standard. But when we talk about non-standalone standard, it is new radio cell will use 4G cell as a control plane anchor. So we have two types of 5G new core network or new radio standard implementation. So in both of the cases, G node B is going to be used. So as seen in this, when 4G is considered as a part of or known standalone architecture, so we have a EPC. EPC is basically 4G standard core network, which is connected to 4G base station. It is connected to 5G base station. Now in this case, which is basically non-standalone case, in this case, we have dual connectivity between LT and NR, and is of particular importance because due to this non-standalone case, we have these two connectivities, that your EPC is connected to G node B, your EPC is connected to E node B, and your user equipment is connected to both the cells. So that is why these multiple cells connections are available in 5G architecture, and this LT based master cell will handle all the control plane functionality. It means the connection setup process and all those setups are handled by control planes, and user plane signaling, and NR based secondary cell handles the user plane signaling. So it means user plane and control plane part are handled by EPC or E node B, and only user plane, it means your user plane means here you have a connection, then you have access to the network and you will use that network, will be provided to boost the data rate by the NR based cell. So this LT cell is called the master cell, and this G node B cell is called the secondary cell. So we can say that as per this non-standalone standard, we can say that we have LTE evolution packet core network, we have new radio NG core network. So we have this LTE core, we have this core network connected to our own, their own base stations. They are also interconnected, and finally they are connected to user equipment. So this is our 4G connection. This is our 5G OFDM base. So this connection is as per the requirement of the network. You will get the evolution. So whatever the requirement of the use case, it will get the connections, or it will move accordingly, or it will provide the sub-carriers or combination of sub-carriers to the user. So non-standalone means, standalone means fully 5G core network, and non-standalone means we have 4G network and we have 4G node B, we have 5G node B, they are connected to the 4G network. So another DRX mechanism which was there in 4G, it is also in 5G, but there is one more active state. Previously, it was only RRC ideal or RRC connected, but in 5G, we have RRC ideal, we have RRC active, and we have RRC inactive. So whenever your new radio device or 5G device will be in RRC idle state, it means no data is transferring, no core network connection is there. But whenever it is in active state, so there is no data transfer is there, but RRC connection is established, core network connection is established. And when it is in inactive state, it means your data transfer, RRC context established, core network connection is established. So we have states whenever you have 3 different states in new radio technology accordingly for as per the traffic activity of the particular cell or particular user. So first 2 RRC states, one are ideal and connected, are similar to the counterparts in LTE, and inactive is a new state introduced in new radio which was not present in LTE device. And accordingly, according to these RRC states, we have core network states also, which is called core network connected or core network ideal. So it is depending on whether the device has established a connection with the core network or it is not established a connection with the core network. So you can say that this DRX mechanism was used by LTE Similar type of DRX mechanism was used by 5G also. This 5G has idle and connected state. 4G has idle and connected state, but 5G has idle, active, or inactive state. And on the basis of these three states, we have core network ideal, we have core network connected. So 5G has some of the features, but those features are evolved because of that new scalable subcarrier spacing. So this continuous reception was also configured to reduce the power consumption as it was configured in 4G communication, but it will handle multiple numerologies also. The next major thing which is considered to be the part of architecture was network function virtualization. Now, what is this network function virtualization? We have two more features of architecture is left. One is NFV, another is slicing. So network function virtualization means whenever we have service providers or telecom operators, if you see nowadays they are using elements or hardware appliances of proprietary appliances, and in order to meet the user and application requirement, these proprietary hardware applications, obviously whenever item is proprietary, it is costly and it takes time to come to the market, because we have to purchase, service provider has to purchase all the appliances from a single provider, you can say. If you go to any of the mobile switching center, you'll see either you will get all the equipments of Nokia, all the equipments of Siemens hardware appliances, or all the equipments of ZTE. So it means there is a monopoly of particular service elements, and it will obviously take time to make them work together, because you have to avail them, you have to acquire them, then you have to install them, and then a particular company will have a monopoly that it is my equipment, I'm working on this particular equipment likewise. So it means to deploy a new network service, they often need to acquire, configure and operate a new specialized hardware. If 2G was there, they have different architecture hardwares. 3G was there, different hardware. Then 4G, it is specialized hardware is needed, and then 5G also specialized hardware is needed. So it will obviously increase the cost, power consumption, and the complexity. So solution to this particular problem is network function virtualization. Now, how does this network function virtualization work? I'll show you first that if you see in this diagram, this network function virtualization has some software defined network control, which is the part of the control plane. It has some network function virtualization controller, and whenever you have different libraries accelerators from different vendors, so the main purpose of this is that suppose you have some encryption algorithms, you have compressions, you have pattern matching or video processing, intrusion detection, and so over. Whichever part you required, you have different vendors for this. You are acquiring, service providers acquiring from different vendors. Then those particular library of hardware accelerators are compatible or pass on through NFV controller, and these third party hardwares, different party hardwares, are having NFV interfacing. They are able to communicate with each other. They have different interfacing, but they can communicate with each other, and this NFV controller is transmitting to this hardware party hardwares. They are communicating with these interfaces, these NFV interfaces, and finally they are communicating with SDN, software defined network controller, and that too on programmable control plane. So this NFV can be FPGA based NFV. So we can say that SDN, which is the part of this network function virtualization, it is basically for programmability of the control plane, and it is programmable, and as per the requirement it can be programmed. So NFV is mainly focused on the programmability of the data plane. So we have that control plane can be handled by SDN control and data plane can be handled by NFV controller. So we can say that NFV devices could be used by seamlessly coexistence of the SDN control and NFV for the programmable data control data plane, which is basically giving fully programmable network devices. So as per the requirement, you need not to change the device's hardware. You have to reprogram it as per the requirement. So this is the major concern of NFV, that it will obviously save that thing. But what are the benefits? Obviously, cost was reduced, time to market was reduced. It is highly flexible. But the challenges which are there for them, network function virtualization will only scale if all the functions can be automated. It can only work if all the functionalities related to NFV can be virtualized or automated. Then it can be implemented fully. And if we have to ensure appropriate level of resilience to hardware and software failures, because if it is available with all the hardware and software, and if it fails, obviously your system get down and you have some resilience required for hardware and software failures. Then integrating of multiple virtual appliances from different vendors, which is very difficult, but they have started implementing this thing for 5G communication. And this softly defined network or softly defined network supports software defined networking functionality. So basically we can say it is able to provide high performance packet processing at same time to provide high energy efficiency. So NFV is one of the major part of 5G communication architecture. Then network slicing. Network slicing is another advantage of 5G communication or numerology also, because of numerology we are able to have this network slicing feature, that virtualization will allow 5G network to present multiple faces for different use cases using a concept called network slicing. Whenever you have virtualization, so with the help of virtualization, your 5G network will be able to give you different applications. If suppose you want to have just high speed network, want to have a GPPS, you want to have GPPS network, and that GPPS network will have different slice requirements. So it will be on the slice 1, then slice 2, slice 3, slice 4. So as per the application 1, application 2, application 3, application 4, you can have different slices. So it means it allows an operator to provide multiple service with different performance characteristics. And the advantage of this architecture is that the operator can create slices which are fine-tuned for specific use cases. One slice could target autonomous vehicles, another could target EMBB, another could target low throughput IoT sensors, and so on. So if you see in this diagram, we have external network, we have devices with specific slices, we have radio access network, and we have core network. So these radio access resources are allocated across different slices, and each slice has different specific quality of service characteristics. Suppose you are using your smartphone, you are using your multimedia or social networking site, so your requirement is different. So as per your requirement, your specific quality of service characteristic will be there, which is called radio access network slice 1. That radio access network slice 1 is connected to core network slice 1, and finally it is connected to external network. So this core network is virtualized core network function, which is supporting each and every slide in the network. Then second is your car, autonomous car, or some other features you are using in your car. So you have different slice, different core network, and finally external network. Then third is your sensor, fourth is your medical device, and so on. So you have different slices for that, and that is the term given to network slicing. So this above figure basically shows that we have network slicing architecture,